My name is Natalie, and I am 34 years old. I had always imagined birthdays as a chance to pause to celebrate how far I had come to feel surrounded by love. But on my 34th birthday, I learned the cruelest truth of all, that sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who will break you hardest. I spent months planning this celebration. It wasn't just about dinner or a dress, it was about finally being seen. I had clawed my way through years of long nights and sacrifices, building my career in marketing brick by brick until I became an executive director. I had the lakefront apartment, the luxury car, the wardrobe I had once only dreamed of when I was a little girl watching my mother count pennies at the grocery store. I thought maybe if I put it all together in one perfect evening, my family would finally look at me, not with jealousy, not with indifference, but with pride. I bought a Stella McCartney silk dress, cream-colored with delicate crystal beading along the neckline. It was the most expensive thing I had ever purchased for myself. $3,000. That wasn't just fabric, it was proof that my years of grinding, of putting myself last, had finally amounted to something. I imagined walking into that restaurant, my mother's eyes softening, my sister Vanessa finally proud, my niece Sophia smiling with admiration. I imagined a moment where for once, I wouldn't feel like the outsider in my own family. But I should have known better. Vanessa and I have always been opposites. She had Sophia at 20, dropped out of community college, drifted through boyfriends and low-paying jobs. She stumbled. I held steady. She struggled. I succeeded. But instead of pride in me, my mother Patricia always turned her sympathy toward Vanessa. It had been that way since we were children. When I practiced piano until my fingers ached and played flawlessly at recitals, I got a distracted nice job. When Vanessa stumbled through her piece with mistakes, my mother stood and clapped like it was genius. That was the rhythm of our family. Vanessa was brave. Vanessa was struggling. Vanessa was special. I was just lucky. As adults, that pattern only deepened. Whenever Vanessa's landlord threatened eviction, I wired money. When her car broke down, I paid for repairs. When Sophia needed something, dance costumes, school trips, rides, I was always the one who stepped in. I even added Vanessa as an authorized user to my credit card for emergencies. Somehow, emergencies looked a lot like designer handbags and weekend getaways. Still, I kept paying. Because isn't that what family is supposed to do? So when Sophia turned 16, I did what I thought any loving aunt would do. I bought her a car. A safe, reliable sedan, titled in my name for insurance. She scowled when I said she could use it until graduation instead of having it outright. I told myself she was just a teenager. She'd understand one day, but that understanding never came. On the night of my birthday, I arrived early at the restaurant. The staff greeted me with a smile. "Happy birthday, Miss Wells. Your private room is ready." My friends came first. Kate, Jasmine, Daniel, and Ryan beaming, hugging me, handing me wrapped gifts. For a moment, I felt the warmth I'd been starving for. But as the clock ticked past 7, my family still hadn't arrived. By the time they finally walked in, late, unapologetic, Sophia dressed like she was going clubbing. Instead of to one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, the magic had already begun to fade. The night unraveled in a slow bleed of indifference and contempt. My friends toasted me with words that made me want to cry: kindness, strength, determination. My mother's toast was a casual 34, already time flies. Vanessa raised her glass with a smirk. To my little sister, always reaching for the stars while the rest of us stay on the ground. Sophia didn't even look up from her phone. And then came dessert. A glittering chocolate creation, a sparkler glowing as the room sang happy birthday. For just a fleeting moment, I let myself smile. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the night everything changes. But then Sophia leaned close to Vanessa, whispering, smirking. My mother leaned in too. Their eyes flicked toward me, conspiratorial sharp. I tried to ignore it. I told myself, not tonight, please not tonight. When I offered Sophia an olive branch, telling her how glad I was she had come, she looked me dead in the eyes and said coldly, "Yeah, whatever. Must be nice to waste money like this when there are people starving. Her words hit like a slap. I swallowed my hurt and tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. But then the topic of Sophia's future came up. I mentioned the college fund I had quietly saved for her since she was a baby. I thought it would show them my love, my investment in her future. Instead, it ignited fury. Vanessa's voice dripped with resentment. So you've just been sitting on a pile of money while we struggled, and that's when it happened. Sophia rose from her chair, her glass of cranberry cocktail in her hand. Her voice cut like glass across the room. You want to know what I think of your fancy dress and your fancy life? And before I could breathe, before anyone could stop her, the crimson liquid was in the air, splattering across my chest, soaking into my silk dress. The dress that was supposed to be my moment of triumph. Red streaks ran down like blood, staining not just the fabric, but every fragile hope I'd carried into that night. The restaurant froze, my friends gasped, my heart stopped. And then with a smirk that will haunt me forever, Sophia delivered the final blow. Now you look as cheap as you really are. The sound of laughter, my sister's sharp chuckle, my mother's low sigh cut deeper than the cold cocktail dripping down my skin. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't horrified. They were entertained. My 34th birthday, a night I had imagined would finally prove my worth to them, had become the stage for my humiliation. For a second, I just stood there frozen, the crimson stains spreading across the cream silk, the beads catching the light like cruel little sparks. My friends leapt into action, Kate dabbing at the fabric with napkins, Daniel demanding to know what was wrong with them. But I couldn't hear their words. All I could hear was the echo of Sophia's voice, that smirk in every syllable. Now you look as cheap as you really are. It's strange how one moment can break you in ways 1,000 disappointments never could. I had endured Vanessa's sarcasm, my mother's indifference, Sophia's teenage contempt. But that night, with everyone watching, they didn't just mock me. They exposed me. Or maybe in their eyes they revealed the truth. They had always believed that I would never belong, no matter how much I gave, no matter how high I climbed. I excused myself and fled to the restroom, the sound of my heels echoing on marble. Inside, under the fluorescent lights, I stared at my reflection. Mascara streaked down my cheeks. My silk dress ruined my hands, trembling. I gripped the sink, forcing myself to breathe. Why? The question beat in my skull. Why wasn't I enough for them? Why, after all these years of giving, of sacrificing, of trying, did they still treat me like a joke? Jasmine followed me, in her voice gentle. Nat, don't let them do this to you. You don't deserve it. But the thing was, I believed I did. Some broken part of me believed that no matter how much I tried, they were right. That's what family does when love turns sour. They rewrite your worth until you start to believe their version. I left the restroom, shoulders squared, determined to salvage what was left of the night. My friends tried to create a buffer of laughter and kindness, but my family sat smug and unbothered, as though they hadn't just shredded me. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine. Maybe next year you'll keep it small, Maddie, she said, using the childhood nickname she always wielded like a blade. Something more modest. My mother nodded as if it were wisdom. Sophia smirked, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I smiled tightly, thanked everyone for coming, and ended the night early. My friends hugged me fiercely, whispering apologies they didn't owe. My family left without so much as a backward glance. When I got home, I hung the ruined dress in my closet, the red stains glaring against the cream fabric like scars. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was proof of what I had endured and of what I could never let happen again. The days that followed were a haze of shame and anger. At work, I buried myself in projects, presenting campaigns with perfect poise, while inside I replayed that moment in the restaurant over and over again. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Sophia's voice, Vanessa's smirk, my mother's silence. I had given them everything: money, time, loyalty, and they had given me nothing but contempt. Then 1 week later, the phone rang. It was Vanessa. Her tone was casual, almost cheerful. Hey, sis. So, about Sophia's college fund. We've been talking, and since you've been saving all this money for her, we thought it'd be best if you transferred it to my account now. That way I can manage it. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. My humiliation was still raw, and yet here she was asking for more. Not an apology, not remorse, money, always money. Always. I laughed. It was sharp, bitter, and it startled even me. No, Vanessa. I said, my voice low but steady. Not anymore. There was a pause, then her voice hardened. What's that supposed to mean? She's your niece. You owe her. I gripped the phone tighter, my nails biting into my palm. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. You've taken enough from me. Her gasp was sharp, angry. You're pathetic, Natalie. All that money and you still think you're better than us. You'll regret this. But when the call ended for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt with them: power. Fragile, trembling, but real. That night, I opened my laptop and pulled up every account. I removed Vanessa as an authorized user on my credit card. I canceled the car insurance tied to Sophia's vehicle. I locked the college fund into a trust with my name as the sole executor. With every click, every confirmation, I felt the chains loosen. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their punching bag. I was free, or at least I was learning how to be. Vanessa didn't take my refusal quietly. Within days, the text messages began. Long paragraphs at 2 a.m. accusing me of betrayal. Screenshots of bills, rent notices, Sophia's tuition estimates, all prefaced with, "If you really cared about family." At first I ignored them, but then came the calls from my mother. Her voice was weary, filled with that familiar blend of guilt and manipulation. Natalie, can't you see what you're doing? Sophia's just a child. Vanessa's struggling. We've always taken care of each other. I nearly dropped the phone from the sting of it. Taken care of each other, I thought of the thousands I had poured into their emergencies, the nights I had stayed up worrying while they squandered every gift. I thought of the red cocktail dripping down my dress, my mother's silence as Sophia mocked me in front of everyone. No, Mom, I said softly but with steel in my voice. I've taken care of them, and you watched, and you let them treat me like dirt. There was silence on the line, broken only by her sigh. You've changed, she whispered. She was right, I had. What I didn't expect was the escalation. 2 weeks later, I returned home to find Sophia's car parked haphazardly across my driveway, blocking me in. She was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, her phone camera already rolling. Hey, Aunt Nat, she said mockingly, ready to explain to TikTok why you stole my college fund? My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about family drama anymore, it was about public humiliation, weaponized for clicks and sympathy. She filmed herself crying fake tears, calling me greedy, selfish, heartless. By the next morning, the video had thousands of views, shared by her friends and strangers who knew nothing of the truth. I wanted to scream, to defend myself online, to shout the truth from every rooftop. But Danielle, my colleague and closest confidant, sat me down in my office. You can't fight fire with fire, Nat. Not like this. You have to decide, do you want revenge or do you want freedom? The word echoed through me, freedom. That night I walked through my apartment, turning off lights one by one, until only the glow from my closet spilled across the floor. The ruined birthday dress still hung there, stained and stiff. I reached out, fingers brushing the fabric, and felt the fury rise again. But beneath it was something else: clarity. That dress wasn't just a reminder of humiliation. It was a symbol of the line I would never cross again. So I took it down, folded it carefully, and placed it into a storage box. Not to forget, but to remember. The next morning, I drafted an email to my bank. All future financial assistance requests from Vanessa or Sophia were to be denied. I informed my lawyer that any attempts to access Sophia's car under my name would be blocked. I closed every door they had ever walked through to reach me. And then I did something I should have done years ago. I booked a ticket. Not for work, not for family obligations, but for myself. A week in Italy alone. I told no one. On the plane, as the city lights disappeared beneath the clouds, I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't running from their chaos, I was running toward my own life. But even across the ocean, the messages kept coming. Sophia's TikTok followers ballooned as she painted herself the victim of a cold, rich aunt who abandoned her. Vanessa posted cryptic Facebook updates about betrayal from within the family. And my mother left voicemails that grew more bitter by the day. Yet sitting in a cafe in Florence sipping espresso while church bells rang, I realized something: their voices could only reach me if I let them. and I was done letting them. But peace never comes without a price. On my second night abroad, I got an email from a blocked account. Just 2 sentences. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. My stomach dropped as I read those words glowing on my phone screen in the dim light of the Florence hotel room. For a moment, I just stared, heart pounding so hard I could hear the echo in my ears. Who had sent it, Vanessa Sophia? Some faceless troll who had eaten up her TikTok lies. I read it again, the threat sitting heavy in my chest. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. I tried to dismiss it as just words, but fear has a way of creeping into every corner when it comes from the people who know you best. I turned off my phone, but sleep never came that night. I kept seeing the splash of red across my cream dress, hearing Sophia's cruel laugh, feeling the weight of my mother's silence. When I flew home a week later, the first thing I noticed was the silence in my apartment. It should have been comforting, but instead it felt staged like the calm before a storm. I checked my mail only to find an envelope slipped under the door with no postage, no address. Inside was a single photo of me at the restaurant on my birthday. Mid-gasp, the cocktail staining my chest, my face caught in anguish. Across the bottom, written in black marker, were the words, "Cheap suits you." My knees went weak. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. This was obsession. I called Danielle immediately. She came over within the hour, her presence steadying me. She held the photo like evidence, her jaw tight. "They're trying to break you," she said. "This isn't about money anymore. It's about power. They want you to bend to come crawling back." I sank into the couch, my hands trembling. But what if they don't stop? What if this never ends? Danielle looked me in the eye, her voice sharp but kind. "Then you stop them." That night, I started gathering my own kind of evidence. Screenshots of Sophia's TikToks, copies of Vanessa's texts, recordings of my mother's voicemails. Piece by piece, I built a record not just of their cruelty, but of a pattern, a campaign, a war. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when Sophia showed up at my office. She waltzed past reception like she owned the place, her phone held high recording. "Look, everyone!" she shouted, spinning around to catch the bewildered faces of my coworkers. "Here's the aunt who stole from her own niece." Gasps filled the room. My boss rushed out confused, demanding security. And there I was, frozen, my professional world colliding with my personal nightmare. Sophia's eyes glittered with triumph. She thought she had destroyed me. But something inside me snapped in that moment, not with fear, but with fury. I walked straight up to her, my heels clicking against the tile, and lowered her phone with a firm hand. My voice was steady, cold. "Get out, Sophia, or I'll make sure the world knows the truth about you. All of it." For the first time, I saw her flinch. Just slightly. Just enough to know she had heard the steel in my voice. Security escorted her out, and the office buzzed with whispers. I shut myself in my office, shaking, but inside that trembling was a spark of something else: resolve. That night I called a private investigator. If they wanted war, I would give them one, but on my terms. No more defense, no more silence. It was time for me to strike back. The private investigator arrived with a quiet efficiency that felt like a balm to my frayed nerves. He was nothing like the dramatized detectives on TV, no fedora, no swagger. Just a man with tired eyes and a satchel full of gadgets who listened while I rattled off the timeline, the dress, the cocktail, the TikTok, the photo slipped under my door. He asked precise questions, then left with a promise I wanted to believe. "We'll find who's pulling the strings." For the first time since that night, I slept a sliver easier, buoyed by the knowledge that I wasn't invisible to someone anymore. Days passed in a blur of interviews and surveillance footage, and slowly the picture came into focus. The investigator traced the anonymous email and discovered a burner account linked to a local PR firm notorious for manufacturing outrage. The footage showed Vanessa meeting with one of the firm's operatives outside a cafe 2 weeks before my birthday. A receipt placed them at the same florist where Sophia had stood when she first filmed the staged crying TikTok. The oddest, most chilling detail: the man from the PR firm had once worked for an influencer network that specialized in viral smear campaigns. It was all connected, too neat, too cruel to be coincidence. When I saw the photos Danielle had printed the cafe table with Vanessa's coffee cup, the florist receipt with a timestamp matching Sophia's posting, I felt a dizzy combination of rage and relief. They had orchestrated the humiliation, weaponized a family moment into content for followers and sympathy. It wasn't spontaneous teenage cruelty. It was manufactured cruelty. Somebody had fed them a script and handed them cameras. Armed with the evidence, Danielle filed a cease and desist and submitted a formal complaint to my company's HR about the public harassment. We also documented the anonymous threats with the detective and reported them to the police, who opened a file. It was a small bureaucratic comfort, but it mattered. It was proof that my reality was not a melodrama I'd imagined. It was a targeted campaign, and it could be dismantled. Each form I signed felt like knocking a brick out of the wall they'd built around me. Vanessa's reaction was immediate and venomous. She posted a frantic rebuttal on Facebook, character assassination thinly veiled as victimhood. She called me cold, ungrateful, a liar. My mother left a message, shaky, pleading that iced me. "Please, Natalie, stop this. We're family." The word family felt like a loaded gun pointed at my chest. How many times had I been expected to swallow humiliation in the name of family? How many more times would I be expected to pay for their comfort with my dignity? Sophia, emboldened by the firm's reach, continued posting, but the tide began to shift. The investigator uncovered bank transfers from the PR firm to Sophia's friend groups, small amounts, but enough to create a web of willing participants who amplified the hurt. And then, crucially, he discovered messages from Vanessa arranging payment for the man who'd slipped the anonymous photo under my door. The texts were blunt, transactional, and damning. With Danielle's guidance, we compiled everything into a dossier and presented it to the police. The detective who had first opened the file looked at the messages, then at me, and for the first time his voice had the weight of certainty. "We can bring charges for harassment, conspiracy to defame," he said. "If we can link the firm and Vanessa directly, there's also a case for extortion and stalking." Hearing the words out loud made my chest ache, but it also set loose a vindicating current under my anger. This was no longer merely about dignity, it was about justice. The next weeks were a whirlwind of subpoenas and court dates. My inbox filled with interview requests, some sympathetic, some predatory. Some outlets wanted the salacious angle. Others wanted to spotlight the growing problem of manufactured online cruelty. I learned to brace myself for cameras, for strangers' opinions, for the inevitable questioning of motive that follows anyone who dares to stand up. Danielle coached me through each step, reminding me to stick to facts, to let evidence do the speaking. It was a strange comfort to be reduced to documents and timestamps, but also to be defended by them. Even as the legal machinery churned, the personal toll did not lift. My mother's calls became sporadic and then ceased. Guilt, pride, and habit tangled until she no longer had a coherent message to pass. Vanessa's messages morphed into threats and then into cold silence. Sophia's followers shrank as the truth surfaced. Some of her closest online friends messaged privately, begging to know the whole story, and in a few cases admitting they'd been paid to participate. The unraveling was messy and painful to watch, like watching a family album burn while you try to save the photographs that matter. There were moments of loneliness so acute, I could feel them as a physical ache. Walking through my apartment, I'd pause by the boxed dress and feel both the sting of that night and a kinship with the woman who once wore it, expecting a simple celebration. I found myself speaking aloud, sometimes to Danielle, sometimes to no one, cataloging the choices that had led me here. The money sent late at night, the calls I'd answered instead of asking for help, the times I'd smoothed over family drama because it felt easier than conflict. Those choices had been made with love, or what I had been taught to call love, and I was learning like a slow lesson to reframe them as what they were: leverage for others, wear and tear on my heart. Then came the hearing that none of us wanted but all of us needed. The prosecutor laid out the pattern with crisp clarity: payments, coordination, the purposeful manufacture of public humiliation. Vanessa's face was stone, like a woman who'd been taught never to show fear. Sophia's cheeks reddened as the messages exposing the staged nature of her posts scrolled across the screen. For a heartbeat, I feared my mother would walk in and bring the old rhythms back. She did not. Instead, she sent a brief text. "I'm sorry. It was small, but it was something." At the close of the hearing, the judge authorized an emergency restraining order against Vanessa and a temporary injunction preventing Sophia from posting or approaching my property. The relief that washed over me was surprising in its intensity. It wasn't vindictive. It was the quiet release of having space reclaimed. For the first time since that night, I could breathe in my own home without watching the window. Yet even as the legal scaffolding rose around my life, a new problem dawned: the cost. Legal battles require money, stamina, and an emotional ledger that didn't always balance. Danielle reminded me of my options of civil suits and settlements. The investigator handed over his final report, every line the product of tireless work. It read like a narrative of betrayal stitched in black and white. Standing in the light of my living room, the boxed dress at my feet, I felt the strange, complicated thing that had been growing inside me since the first beat of Cocktail hit silk, not just survival, but strategy. I would not be defined by that night or by their cruelty. I would painstakingly and deliberately rebuild boundaries. I would ask for restitution not out of spite, but because what they had done had a real cost. I would make sure no one could weaponize my generosity again. The case was far from over. There would be hearings and testimony and the inevitable public morass that follows these things. But for the first time in months, the path ahead felt less like a desperate scramble and more like a deliberate route. I had filed the evidence, set the law in motion, and claimed back the space that had been taken. The next steps would demand courage I'd never truly practiced before. I closed my eyes and imagined the woman I wanted to be, not a martyr, not a martyr's shadow, but a person who could protect herself, who could hold her own line and still learn to love without losing herself. The months that followed became a strange rhythm of courtroom appearances, long meetings with Danielle, and nights alone with my thoughts. Every time I walked into that courthouse, I felt like a piece of me was on trial, not just my choices, but my worth, my dignity, my right to stand apart from a family that had tried so hard to chain me down. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table with that same arrogant tilt of her chin, Sophia beside her, eyes darting anywhere but at me. They looked less like a mother and daughter and more like co-conspirators caught red-handed. When the prosecutor laid out the timeline, how the PR firm had been paid, how the smear campaign had been staged, how even the cruel photo of me had been planted, Vanessa's face remained a mask. But Sophia's cracked. Tears slid down her cheeks, not of remorse, but of exposure. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the villain in a story the world had finally begun to see. I can't explain the cocktail of emotions that swirled in me watching it all. There was anger, yes, but beneath it, grief. Grief for the family I had always wanted, but never truly had. Sitting in that sterile courtroom, I realized that what I mourned wasn't them, but the illusion I'd spent my whole life clinging to. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke slowly. Each word measured, my hands folded tightly in front of me. I told the court about the years of sacrifice, the money wired at midnight, the car I bought for Sophia, the rent I paid, the debts I covered. I told them about the birthday, the cocktail staining my dress, my niece's voice calling me cheap. My voice shook, but I did not break. And when I finally looked at Vanessa, I didn't see power anymore. I saw desperation. The ruling came weeks later. The judge upheld the restraining order, awarded damages for defamation and harassment, and ordered restitution for the expenses I had incurred through their manipulation. It wasn't just a legal win, it was a moral one. A line drawn in ink where I had never been able to draw one in blood. But victory, I learned, doesn't erase scars. The day after the judgment, I found myself back in my apartment, staring at the boxed birthday dress. I pulled it out, ran my fingers along the stiff, stained fabric, and for the first time, I didn't feel humiliation. I felt vindication. That dress had been the weapon they used to try to break me, but now it was proof that I had survived. I didn't hear from my mother for months. Then one evening a letter arrived. Her handwriting trembled across the page. "Natalie, I failed you. I chose silence when I should have chosen you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I see it now. I read the letter 3 times, tears smudging the ink, but I didn't rush to call. Healing, I realized, didn't mean opening every door again. Sometimes it meant knowing which ones to leave closed. Life slowly rebuilt itself around me. My career thrived. My friends became my true family, and I began to discover joy in the smallest rituals: morning walks by the lake, cooking dinner for myself, with music echoing through my apartment, buying flowers just because I liked the way they looked in the sunlight. These weren't acts of indulgence, they were acts of reclaiming. On my 35th birthday, I didn't throw a lavish party. I invited only the people who had held me up through the storm. We laughed, we toasted, we sang off key. And when I blew out the candles, I didn't wish for my family to love me. I wished for the strength to keep loving myself. So if you are listening now and you've been betrayed, humiliated, or torn down by the people who should have lifted you up, let my story remind you. You do not owe anyone your silence, your money, or your dignity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, protect what's yours, and choose a future where you are no longer someone else's scapegoat. If my story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your voice matters here.